And my mother's mother traces her family back in Curacao to the Spanish Inquisition. It was their second stop after the Inquisition. And my opa was from Den Haag all the way going forward. And the synagogue in Den Haag is named after my opa, which is a very special thing for me and for my family. So I just knew that there were a lot of Dutch people, so I had to say that. So, oh, perfect. You just pass them. There's a box there. You just pass it around. That'd be great. So back to the history of this congregation. The Spanish-Portuguese congregation here in Montreal existed. It's celebrating its 250th anniversary this year. And once there was a big enough group of Eastern European Jews and Western European non-Sephardic Jews, they decided that they wanted to form their own congregation because, and the primary reason that they cited for it, they wanted their music back. The Sephardic customs were different from what they grew up with in Europe, so they wanted their music back. And so they formed in 1846 the Congregation of English, German, and Polish Jews. It's a sort of an odd pairing, but when you consider the fact that Spanish and Portuguese really just was a different way of saying Sephardic, so English, German, and Polish was a different way of saying Ashkenaz. And so they formed their own congregation in 1846. The first building that they owned was built in 1860, and the second building was in 1880-something, and the third building is this building. Now, the sanctuary is over that way, and that half of the building was built in 1922. This lobby and all of this side of the building that you're standing in were built in 1967. They needed to expand as a result of the baby boom, and this congregation had as many as 1,700 families in its largest form. It now has about between 1,300 and 1,400, which is partly a result of natural attrition and partly a result of the French language woes that Quebec has faced over the last 40 years, if not more, that have led almost a generation's worth of children to move to other places where they wouldn't face those stresses, such as Toronto and the States. So, in the early 1900s, the president of the congregation was Lazarus Cohen, who was Leonard's great-grandfather. And he was succeeded a few years later by Lion Cohen, who was Leonard's grandfather, both of whose portraits you can see in the stairwell over there. The one that's closest to the wall is not a Cohen, but the long beard and the one that's a little bit lower are the two Cohens, and you can see there are plaques under their names. And we'll walk down there because I'll show you the museum as well, which there's also some interesting Cohen connections to. But so Leonard's grandfather, Lion, was the president of the congregation when this new building was built in 1922. And there is an interesting piece of memorabilia in the museum downstairs, which you'll see when you go there. It's kind of it's too small a space to have all of us in there at once and for me to be able to speak to you. But when you enter the museum, on the immediate right, there is a gold Hanukkah menorah, an 8-branch, or actually it's a 9-branch with the center menorah, which is one of the oldest pieces of Canadian-made Judaica art. It was donated to the congregation by Lion Cohen, Leonard's grandfather, on the occasion of the bar mitzvah of his son, Nathan Cohen, who was Leonard's father, in 1906. So, to fast forward a few years later, this building gets built. Leonard is born in 1934 and continues the family association of coming here to Shar HaShamayim. And Leonard was 9 years old when his father passed away, and so he and I communicated about him coming to say Kaddish on occasion for his father, together with his uncles and so on. And they sat, and when we go in the sanctuary, you'll see that they all sat in row C. I'll show you where it is. Not because they were Cohen in row C, it just happened that way. But they were toward the front because that was a place of honor for families that had significance within the community. So, in 1949, Leonard graduated the Shar HaShamayim Hebrew School. And this photo I've taken out from where it's usually housed downstairs because, again, it's a narrow hallway where all of the graduation photos are, and impossible to get you all in there at once. But here at the front right corner is 14-year-old Leonard standing at the steps of this building. Now, this lobby was grafted onto the building in 1967. When we enter the sanctuary, you'll see that the original facade of the building, these 3 doorways and all of the stonework that's here, is still preserved there, but the steps that they're standing on don't exist anymore. And many of the people that are in this photo still are members of the congregation, still come to synagogue. 2 of them were here yesterday. The woman standing right next to Leonard, who she is rather excited about her newfound fame on the news in the last year. But she has fame from another source. Her name is Rosalind, her married name is Rosalind Pinker. Her son is a very famous Harvard professor, Steven Pinker, who has written many books on society and language and humanism and all sorts of other things that I really don't understand. But people at Harvard do, which is why he teaches at Harvard. And so I'll put this photo here. You can all see it on the way. So, Leonard was bar mitzvahed here, and you know the parts of the stories of the rest of Leonard's career that led him to New York, and then to Los Angeles, and so forth. Leonard always maintained an association with this community. Leonard would frequently donate to various causes that we had, especially when it comes to feeding the hungry. That was something that was very important to him. I got connected with Leonard in, I would say, around 2006, 2005. I became the cantor here in 2004. And very quickly, when you move to Montreal, I'm American by birth, but I became a Canadian citizen about 5 weeks ago. After 16 years living here, I decided it was time, and so I'm a dual citizen now. I'm very proud of it. When you come to Montreal, you learn 3 things very quickly. That Montreal bagels are the best bagels in the world. That the Montreal Canadiens are the most important sports franchise in the world, even though we stink currently. And last night we won. In overtime. A small victory. And number 3 is that all things artistic, with respect to Mordechai Richler, all things artistic revolve around Leonard Cohen. And so it was a name that I had heard of, and I joined this congregation in 2004 to become the cantor, and Leonard's cousin's wife. Leonard had a first cousin, Edgar, who was the son of one of his uncles, and they were very, very close. And his wife, Ruth, who comes here most weeks, we had recorded the choir and I had recorded a sample CD of a trip of 30 seconds worth of this and 30 seconds worth of that of our liturgical year, just as something to have almost as a business card and as a trial run to see how we would do recording. She had gotten it and she had sent it to Leonard, and she told me that Leonard was favorably impressed and said, "Here's his email address, maybe you want to write him." So I didn't know how to spontaneously email Leonard Cohen. So I waited until what I thought was an appropriate time, which was before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And I wrote him a very brief email to say, "Happy and healthy New Year to you and to those who are dear to you." And Leonard wrote me back, the first of our correspondence that would last the next 10 years. And he said, "May your voice reach that place," with a capital P, "and bring down the blessings," which was one of the most amazing, succinct, beautiful descriptions of what my role is in the synagogue that I've ever seen and probably ever will. And it stuck with me in a very deep kind of way. Now, I don't know if you know a little bit about synagogues. Synagogues have 2 major leaders. There's a rabbi and a cantor. The rabbi's role is to teach and to elucidate the laws and the stories of the Torah and so forth. My role is a liturgical role. I sing the prayers. The prayers are all in Hebrew, in a traditional congregation. The prayers have their own prescribed way that they are supposed to be sung. The idea being that you should be able to take a knowledgeable Jew, blindfold them, spin them around a whole bunch of times so they don't know what time of day it is or what month of the year it is, and put them in a synagogue where a skilled cantor is presiding, and they should be able to, within a very short while, know whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, whether it's a holy day on the calendar, whether it's a weekday, whether it's a Sabbath, and so forth, all based on the way that the cantor is chanting the prayers. So that is tradition that I learned from my teacher, who was the chief cantor of Jerusalem for 30 plus years. And I lived there for 2 years to study with an apprentice with him. And then I came to Montreal. Leonard had an appreciation for this. This was the environment that he grew up in here. So back to the history of this congregation for a second. 1846 it's founded, and in 1887 the membership is clamoring for a choir. And so they formed the Shar Shamayim Choir in 1887, 130 years ago this year. That really does not exist anywhere in the Jewish world almost. Most congregations that have a choir in 1887 don't exist anymore, either because of the Holocaust, or they don't exist anymore because the nature of Jewish worship has changed, like the nature of probably most church worship has changed. I think that the number of Mozart and Schubert and so forth, masses that get done on a regular basis is probably far lower and has been replaced with guitars and keyboards and all sorts of other things that are supposed to be more accessible to people, but in my personal opinion, becomes attaching some of the most beautiful and deep and significant words that we have in any languages and putting nursery rhyme tunes on them. It's dumbing down, to me, personally. But thankfully for me, my community agrees. So they maintained this choir since 1887. And Leonard and I began this correspondence many years after 1887. And we would wish each other greetings before holidays and so forth. And that's the way it went for the first 2-3 years, until Leonard went back on tour in his mid-70s in 2008, 2009, whatever it was. There was a show in Montreal that I couldn't go to, but there was a show a few weeks later in Ottawa, which was sold out, completely sold out. And this was really sort of pre the days of StubHub and these kind of things that you could easily find tickets online. So after trying a number of avenues unsuccessfully, I decided to swallow my pride and send an email to Leonard. And I said, my rabbi and I and our spouses would like to attend the show in Ottawa, but we can't get tickets. If there was any way that you could procure more tickets for us, we would like to buy them. And I put buy in all capitals and underline, boldface, whatever I could do. Please let me know if that's possible. We really would like to buy them. Within an hour and a half, I was CC'd on an email from Leonard to his tour manager saying, please leave 4 complimentary tickets for the rabbi, the cantor, and their spouses. So I wrote back and I said, thank you for procuring the tickets, but I didn't ask for comps. I want to buy them. I'm not looking for a handout. Leonard wrote back saying, given my connection to the shul, which is the Yiddish word for synagogue, and my admiration for the work that you and the rabbi do there, the least I could do is to gift them to you. So I wrote back again and I said, that's very, very kind. Please let me know where I can make a charitable contribution in your honor that might have some meaning to you. And his response was really beautiful. He wrote back and said, any food bank will do. The closer to home, the better. So this was really my first inclination of how fond he was of Montreal, even though his life was centered in Los Angeles for so many years. And we went to the show, and it was a spectacular, moving, religious experience for me. I had never seen anything like it, a man that at that stage in his life giving that much of himself to an audience for that long, and up and down and dancing across the stage. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And I wrote him to express all that to him afterwards. And the conversation continued, the correspondence continued. Before by holidays again, I'd write him. And by the way, all of his emails to me, he signed fraternally Eliezer, his Hebrew name. And on occasion, he would begin sending me a YouTube link to somebody who did a cover of a song of his in Hebrew, or to Israeli soldiers singing Hallelujah, which he found particularly moving. All of a sudden, November 2015 comes around, and I receive an email from him that changed my life irrevocably, which read, Dear Gideon, I wonder if you might be interested in collaborating with me on my new album. I'm looking for the sound of the cantor and the choir of my youth. Please let me know what you're thinking, etc. So luckily I'm usually a person who's up very late at night. Thankfully that night I went to bed early. This email came in a little after midnight East Coast time. And if I had gotten it at midnight, I wouldn't have slept that night. But I woke up at 6:30 in the morning and got the email and shouted something that no member of the clergy should ever shout. It begins with holy, which woke up my wife and my children, and I said, you have to read this. Is this a joke? I checked the email address to make sure that it was actually his. And I tried very nonchalantly to write back to him, and my only response that I came up with was, hallelujah, I'm your man. And later that day, he put me in touch with Adam, who was producing the recording. And by the end of that day, I had in my inbox a very, very rough draft of You Want It Darker. And the mission that was given to us was come up with choral backing for this and a role for the cantor, and let's see how it goes. Now, I was befuddled by this on many, many different levels. A, because I just didn't know what he really wanted. Those were the only instructions we had. And B, the lyrics confounded me on a number of different levels. Now, I had heard rumblings that Leonard was battling various ailments, and I didn't want to speculate, but when somebody with a liturgically attuned ear hears words like magnified, sanctified, which is the prayer for mourners, the Kaddish prayer, and the connotations of the word hineni. Now, hallelujah is a ubiquitous word. It's all over the place. Hallelujah, I did well on my test at school. Hallelujah, it's not raining yet. Hallelujah, whatever. It's thrown around very cheaply. I think partly due to him, but I don't fault him for that. But hallelujah is a ubiquitous word. Hineni is not. Hineni is a word, and actually, it was rather ironic. Where's Jacob?
He is here.
I don't know if you picked this out yesterday or what time you came to synagogue yesterday, but yesterday we read the Torah portion from the book of Genesis in which the word Hineni is found.
Okay, we came too late.
Okay, so the most specific and dramatic reference with the word Hineni is the story of the binding of Isaac, which Leonard had already written a song about 35 years ago, and it is the Abraham is called to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. And he goes up to the mountain and he binds his son, and if you can imagine the scene in the movie, he raises the blade and the sun is glinting off the blade, and he's about to strike down on his son, and a voice from heaven calls, Abraham, Abraham! And his answer is, Hineni, here I am. I am. And you can extrapolate from that. I'm ready to serve, I'm ready to do your will, I'm ready for you to take control of my destiny, whatever you want to say. All of these things are in this word, which is a very heavy word to throw over. So, anyway, I presented the email to my music director, Roy Azulay, and we got together with two of our choir members who are in a fairly well-known Canadian band called Lakes of Canada, who had a better clue into the whole genre than I, the opera-loving cantor, and my classical conductor and music director. And so we sat, the four of us, and tried to figure out what could we do with this. And sketches emerged of various different things. And we had to send a demo recording back to Adam and Leonard. So this is a very busy building. There are lots of things going on here during the week, and that particularly Wednesday night that we had a choir rehearsal the whole building was packed except for the sanctuary. So we set up a microphone in the sanctuary on the pulpit, which you'll see in a little bit, and unless I can take you in there because you're tired of standing, you tell me.
No.
Okay, so we set up a microphone and chairs, and the examples we had printed up, and there was no title on the page, and where the composer's name would normally be found on one of our choral arrangements, we put Eliezer and left it at that because we did not tell the choir members what we were doing. This was very, very early on. We had no idea whether this was actually going to be part of this record, and so we tried to keep it as information is given on a need-to-know basis, and they didn't need to know yet. So we recorded the samples, and I snapped a picture of the scene of us sitting on the pulpit recording recording this, and sent it to Leonard and to Adam. And Leonard wrote back so enthusiastic and so moved, saying how many memories he has in that room and how pleased he was that we were potentially going to be a part of this. So we sent them the samples, we got back their feedback, we sent them another set of samples, and we're told that in 2.5 weeks Adam was coming from Los Angeles to Montreal to go to the studio. So the day comes that Adam is in town. The night before we have a choir rehearsal, and actually we're sitting right here because we usually rehearse out here. I don't know why, we just do. And that night, at the very end of the rehearsal, all the guys knew that we were going into the studio the next night, but had no idea why. And we told them. And said, now don't go posting this on Facebook, don't go tweeting this, don't go telling your friends and so on. We don't know that we're going to be on this recording, this is what we're doing, it's a trial run and so forth. The next day, I go to meet Adam, and he takes me to his dad's house. And I walked into the living room, or the dining room, and there on the table was a scratch pad with a pencil, and a guitar, and a keyboard, and all I could think was, extremely holy things have happened here. And I can't believe that I'm in this. And we went to the studio, and the guys came in and they were introduced to Adam. They go into the recording area. I'm in the control room with Adam and Howard Billerman, who was the recording engineer. And for the first half hour, the guys are so stiff and so deer in the headlights, if you know the expression. And it was really kind of painful. And Adam was great. Adam said, I know what to do. So he got up from the control room, went into the area where the choir was set up with the microphones, and said, guys, I forgot to do something. So I'm going to take out my iPhone, and when I give you the thumbs up, you're going to wave and yell, "Hi, Leonard." And so he takes out his iPhone, and he goes, and all the guys go, "Hi, Leonard!" And they were so excited, and he sent it to him. But what it did was it removed the tension from the air. It allowed them to relax. And what happened in the next 3.5, 4 hours was really magical. And they made amazing music, as you all could hear. And at some point in the afternoon when I was with Adam, I said, I've just got a curious question for you. How does the song end? He said, I don't know. Okay, so we're going along, and at some point we took a break in the thing, and I was listening to the only other Leonard Cohen song that I knew that sounded to me like this, which was Nevermind from, was it Popular Problems? Is it? I don't remember. I think it's from Popular Problems.
Yeah.
And, but I knew it from the theme song to True Detective, the second season of True Detective, which was a horrible season. Terrible. The first season's amazing. I hope the third one's going to be better. The second season was terrible, even though it had all the earmarks of being good. But the song was great, so I found the original version of the song, which is on the album. And the original version of the song, he declaims. He's not really singing. He's declaiming the lyrics. And there's an Arabic female singer who is interpolating in a very Arab prayer mode way called makam on the word salam, which means peace. And so at a certain point I said to Adam, do you think that it makes sense, since Hineni is the core of this song, and it's a really Jewish word, what if I tried to improvise in a cantorial sounding kind of a way, similar to the way that Nevermind has these interludes? And he said, oh, that's an interesting idea. We'll try it when we're done with the night. So 12:30 at night, the choir finishes, they're sent home, and I'm ready to go with them. And Adam says, what about Hineni? I said, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And I hadn't even given it any thought. So they set up a microphone for me, and around 1 o'clock, I went into the recording room and started fooling around with Hineni. And I had the track in the back of my ear with whatever the click time was to make the timing, and a very basic Patrick Watson playing the keyboard in the background, and that was it. And fooled around for 20 minutes making different versions of Hineni. I said, okay, that was fun. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And I'll go on with my life. We then get lyrics to the second song and the basic track of It Seemed a Better Way. And Leonard was concerned about this one, and he actually wrote me an email saying, I'm not sure you guys should do this because the lyrics have a lot of Christological references. Maybe you don't want to be associated. So I re-listened and reread, and I wrote him back with what my take on it was, which was, it seemed a better way when first I heard him speak, but now it's much too late to turn the other cheek. So we know that Leonard admired many other systems of belief. We also know that he remained true to his Jewish identity. So I read this as him saying at age 82 and going through the things that he was going through, it's a lovely idea, but it's not for me right now. And I submitted that very humbly as my take on it. And he said, well, if that's the way you understand it, then go ahead. So we recorded the next set of things in February, and then time passes. And we don't hear very much. And it wasn't until August, well, July, we all of a sudden received a bunch of things to sign off our lives to Sony Canada. And then in August, I got a press copy of a link to click on to listen to it. And Hineni's on the record. And I had no idea it was there. Nobody told me. So the You Want It Darker is released on September 21st, I think it was. And this whole town and this whole community went crazy. And all of a sudden I found myself in Rolling Stone. And I didn't understand why until I realized that I saw the original press release from Sony. And they had said, Leonard Cohen album produced by his son with Gideon Zelermyer and the Zelermyer Choir. And I just could not believe this. And the most beautiful thing was not that, I mean, that's all fleeting, but many of the people that you see in that picture from the class of 1949 called me that day. How proud they were that despite fame and fortune and Los Angeles and misfortune and still Los Angeles and so forth, Leonard reached back home and he remembered this. And it was really, really special for so many people that grew up with him and grew up with the knowledge of him. And I then was invited to go to Los Angeles for the release of the record, which was the day after Yom Kippur. Now, I don't know if you have any idea about Yom Kippur or what it is, or specifically what it does to me. Yom Kippur is a 25-hour fast. No water, no nothing. Fast, complete fast. And I'm singing for about 13 of those 25 hours. And I got home after Yom Kippur was over, and the next morning I was at the airport at 4 o'clock in the morning to fly to Los Angeles, half dead. But the night before, Leonard wrote me an email saying, looking forward to seeing you in Tinseltown, wishing you strength and deep intention over the next 24 hours. He knew what I was going to do. And so I arrived in Los Angeles and had my only chance to really spend any time with him, which was about 25 seconds. But I gave him a prayer book that I randomly found in a pile of prayer books here at Shara Shamayim, old books, and there are lots of old books that are around this building. This was a prayer book that was given by the congregation to Leonard's sister Esther, who had passed away a couple of years before. On her 12th birthday, which was her bat mitzvah, in honor of her achievements in the synagogue's Hebrew school. I wanted to bring him something from home, and I figured that this would be something that might be touching to him, especially it was a Yom Kippur prayer book. So the day after Yom Kippur to bring this to him. And then we had another couple of contacts, and I'll just tell you the last two, together with the sheet music to Leonard, explaining to him the scene and the reason why we did this, and that I hoped that he would receive it with the admiration with which we intended it. Leonard's response to me, which was his last email to me, was unbelievable. When we complete the cycle of reading one of the books of the Torah, the congregation says out loud, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, which means, be strong, and let us strengthen one another. And Leonard's email to me, in Hebrew, was those three words. He knew that we were saying it in synagogue that day. he also knew that he could turn it around and use it as a compliment. And to me, this was just an unbelievable sign, again, of a person who never strayed so far from his roots despite his explorations of other faiths and other beliefs. And it was remarkable to me. And that was the last email we shared. Because 10 days later, sitting in my office, I got a phone call from Robert Corey telling me that Leonard had had a fall. And that was Monday, November 7th. Tuesday was election day, at which the whole world went crazy and seems to continue that way. And they wanted to keep it private, and somehow, whether it was the election or actual people respecting the request for privacy, nobody paid attention. And so Thursday morning, there I was out Mount Royal, together with the rabbi and Adam and Lorca and their children and a few other childhood friends, laying Leonard to rest in the way that he had requested. And the sight, and many of you have probably been there, I don't know if you've gone there yet, but the sight of 4 generations of Cohens next to each other is something that is beautiful, is something that is so typically Montreal, because this is a very multi-generational Jewish community. My son, I married a member of Shara Shemayim. She was not a member of, I was not the cantor at Shara Shemayim when we started dating, so I didn't date a congregant. Just have to say that. But my boys, who are 9 and 6, are now 5th generation members of this congregation. Yesterday's bar mitzvah, 5th generation members of the congregation. The week before, 6th generation members of the congregation. So Adam Cohen would be a 5th generation member of this congregation, and his son would be a 6th generation member of the congregation. That's the way the Montreal Jewish community works. And that night, we had a major symphony concert here at the synagogue, commemorating Remembrance Day, which is a much bigger deal than Veterans Day is in the United States, but those of you from Europe, you know that November 11th is still a big deal in Europe, I assume. Certainly in the UK. And so I was at the cemetery and looking over my shoulder, imagining that a CBC truck was going to screech up to the curb to somehow discovering this, but they didn't. And that night, we had this symphony concert, and I walked off the stage around 9:30 at night, not realizing that around 8:30, the news had broken. And I had a line of about 30 people waiting outside my office door with tears streaming down their face to wish me condolences. And at first I said, for what? For whom? And they said, you don't know? You don't know that Leonard passed away? And then I had to tell them that I actually did. And that Saturday, we said a memorial prayer for him here. Because of his connection to our community and because of the renewed connection that he had brought in his passing and in the last months of his life through the album. So that is sort of the chronicle of the history of the Cohen family and Leonard and our congregation all wrapped into one. If you want to take pictures of the portraits, you're welcome to. The Juno Award that we received as a result of Album of the Year being awarded to You Want It Darker is here, with a quote from Leonard that he sent along to, specifically for the Shara Shemayim Bulletin, about his feelings about our collaboration on this project. There are 2 other things here which you might want to see. First, in the Israeli newspaper Gideon this was published, cartoon was published the day after it became public that Leonard had passed. And I had sort of been holding in my emotions about this until I saw this, and then it led me to really cry. It's a cartoon where it's in Hebrew. The caption emerging from the clouds, God is asking Leonard with a question mark. And Leonard, who is ascending skyward on angel's wings and with a mic in hand, is saying, Hineni, here I am. I saw this and I was so emotioned by this. It was so simple and so beautiful and so whimsical and so just loving. I had been interviewed by the newspaper a couple of weeks before, and I sent an email to that reporter asking if she could get me the contact information for the cartoonist because I wanted to offer my compliments. And I did, and 3 weeks later, this arrived in the mail from him, which was very, very sweet. So this is a beautiful cartoon. And the other thing that's here that I brought from home is that something that Leonard sent to me personally after the recording. It's okay. Yeah, sure. You can do that. When I met with Adam, he asked what I wanted for compensation for my appearance on the recording. And I said nothing. He said, why? I said, well, your dad is a member of the congregation. And I don't think that it's appropriate for me to be deriving some benefit from that relationship. But I do want one thing. He said, what's that? I said, I want to have tea with your father. He said, why? I said, because I want to ask him, of all of the people in the world that would be lining up around the block to record backing vocals for him, why did he want us? And I never got to ask him that question. The only reason that I sort of formulated is that, given his strong attachment to Montreal and to Zelermyer, that this room, which you'll enter in a minute, was the first place that he ever heard anybody sing Hallelujah. And this room was the first place that he ever heard a cantor sing the words, Who by Fire. And this room was the first place that he ever heard a cantor sing Hineni, because it's part of our Rosh Hashanah liturgy. And this was even more hammered home for me when I received one of his self-portraits. The inscription is, just to have been one of them, even on the lowest rung, which I read as a reference to Jacob's ladder. Just to have been one of the angels, even on the lowest rung of the ladder. That story of Jacob's ladder and Jacob's dream, the closing verse of that story is that Jacob wakes up and he says, how could I not have realized that this was a place of God? This is none other than the gate of heaven, which is Shar HaShamayim, where our congregation gets its name. And he inscribed it at the bottom to me, and you can read it for yourselves, but he inscribed it 5 months to the day before he passed away. And so this is hanging in my home with a great sense of pride and a great sense of meaning. And I hope to pass it on to my next generations. So, I'll leave these for you to see here. But if you'd like to follow me, and they'll be here, you can come back to them. Sounds better.